Another day. I'm gonna have to write myself a schedule for this because I feel like I'm doing it very randomly, and for me it makes sense because it's like the days that I get up and do my hair and makeup. Anyway, another day, another topic, and here we go. I want to talk about this weird thing that goes on, and it's this weird assumption that people are entitled to know about your personal life. This bothers me on so many levels for so many reasons, because there is a lot that goes on in people's personal lives that is hard to explain. It's very personal, it's very emotional, and a lot of the times when we want to know this information, it's not the most convenient time, or you're not somebody that we feel comfortable sharing with. Let me give you some examples. When I was growing up, there's this very interesting culture in the Hispanic culture about getting married, having kids, having a family and everything, which conflicts a lot with the other message of you should go to college, you should get a degree and get this career that you're going to be self-sufficient and focus on being independent and, a success on your own. And the reason that these are very conflicting is something that I have struggled with a lot is a lot of times you have to choose between them. So when I got done with college, I was dating this guy, and we'd had a relationship for almost a year. I was thinking about what maybe we would do in the future, what goals would be there, and ultimately it ended, but I was trying to decide where to apply for jobs because I wasn't going to leave if this was still going to work out. When it didn't, I applied everywhere, and that's part of how I ended up moving to San Antonio, and I met my husband. And now we're having the conversation of what it's going to be like when we have kids. If I'm going to stay home, if he's going to stay home, what kind of jobs are going to be available to me. If I am going to stay home, then do I want to find a career that I will eventually leave, or am I going to look for a career like the one I have now that doesn't make as much money, but I have this freedom of a schedule that's very flexible and I can go and have my kid be at home but still do my job. And how long do I have? When are we planning to have kids? And it's a very intricate conversation, but there's a lot of thought that goes into it. But when people ask me what my plans are in life, like what I'm doing in my career, it's a little hard to answer without feeling judged. So I'll be like, oh, well, I'm working part-time with Big Brothers Big Sisters, and it's fairly inconsistent, so I'm kind of able to do all of this other stuff. I get this very you could probably be doing more, so why aren't you doing more? And because we're having conversations, because this is what we decided to do, because of all of the reasons that me and my husband have already talked about and decided on, that you're not privy to, because it's a very personal conversation. I don't mind sharing it with my mom or with my sisters or even with some of my really good friends, but that's because they've kind of followed me on this and we have a very open conversation, so they know all of the things that are going on versus just having a little bit. But people still want to ask those questions. On the other side of it, we have people asking when we're going to have kids. And that one really upsets me for so many different reasons. One of them is kids are a very big responsibility. You can ask anybody that has kids, this shouldn't be just a whimsy or because everybody said we should already. There is going to be sleepless nights, there is going to be all of the financial commitment, the time commitment, all of these things you have to take in consideration when you're having kids. I can't just, we're going to have kids. Okay, well, where is their stuff going to be? Where are they going to sleep? Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to be the one that gets up at whatever in the morning when they need changed or fed or whatever? And it's such a change to what our lives would be, because right now we kind of travel a lot. We go to visit family in other cities. We go to visit my parents in my hometown. We go just to travel to have fun. We're planning our anniversary trip. There's so much that if we throw a child into the mix, or even a pregnancy into the mix, it kind of mixes it up. So, like, you can't sit in long periods of time in a car because, you know, the whole DVT thing that goes on, that you gotta stop every so often to walk and stretch your legs, and it's a lot more than just a simple answer. Another thing, you don't know if somebody is or is not already trying to have kids. So I have friends that have had difficulty. I've got some friends who wanted to get pregnant and got pregnant right away. And then I have some friends who it took them over a year to get pregnant. My husband has a coworker who tried to get pregnant for years and didn't for I think he said 5 years, 10 years almost, that they didn't get pregnant until that point. Imagine what it would do to someone if you're saying, well, when are you going to have kids? And they're in that situation where they've tried and they've been trying for years and they just haven't been able to. That's kind of a shitty thing to have to bring up to somebody, to remind them that they really want to have kids, but they haven't been able to. They can't. You don't always know what's going on behind the curtain, and they're not obligated to share that with you. And as we're kind of talking about it, because our anniversary is coming up and we, like I've always mentioned, I've always wanted to be a mom, we talk about these things. I always ask my doctor a bunch of questions because I want to know what kind of birth control is going to be the best kind. I want to know which kinds are easier to get on and off of. I want to know what I should be doing if we decide to stop going, because I only see her once a year and I could go in more, but I'm also I don't want to spend a lot of money. So I want to know things like, okay, well, whenever we do start trying, what do I have to know? What do I have to look out for? What am I going to be planning and all of this stuff? And so something that I've started to learn is there's really only a small chance that you'll get pregnant every month. So I think she said it was about a 20% chance. Don't quote me on it because I'm not a doctor, okay? If you want to go do your research, you can. But I want to say she said it was about a 20% chance every month that you try, because that's how it works. You only try once a month. Every month, there's about a 20% chance you will or will not get pregnant. And some people fall within that 20% chance to get pregnant right away, even if they are not trying. And great for you. But then there's the other group of people who struggle for months and may or may not get pregnant. So the way diagnosing for infertility goes is you have to be trying for at least a year before they want to start doing tests, because there are some very invasive tests that they do to see if you are or not infertile or fertile. And so that's a really big thing. And then usually within 2 years, you can expect a kid. So if we started trying now when we were infertile or we, are having trouble, 2 years would be our expected, by the time we finally did get pregnant. And all along the way, we have to consider that people are going to be asking, when are you having kids? When are you planning kids? And let's say we say, oh yeah, we're planning to have kids this year. And you don't get pregnant because you're struggling, because there's issues, because finances or whatever, something comes up and you don't. You're going to be the person asking them about this right now. And it's not because they don't want, it's because they're having trouble, because something came up, because some problem happened. Do you really want to bring that up for somebody, whether it's a financial struggle, a physical struggle, an emotional struggle? Maybe they're having trouble in their marriage and they don't want to tell anybody yet because they're trying to work on it. There are a lot more factors than people want to consider when asking about personal issues. When do you want to move? When are you going to house? When are you going to get a new car? When are you going to have kids? When are you going to get married? All of these questions are very, very personal and have a lot more thought that goes into it than just, oh, well, here or now or whatever. There's money, there's time, there's emotions. If people had asked me about getting married when I was with my ex-boyfriend that we'd been together for so long, I really wasn't sure. I was not really something I'd thought about, not really something we'd planned, and it wasn't a conversation we'd had, so I didn't feel comfortable answering it. And then that's a weird pressure to throw into somebody else's relationship that you probably won't have a second thought about. with my husband, people keep asking us when we're going to have kids, or saying that, they're having dreams of us having kids. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm not saying I don't want to have kids. I really do. But you have to take into consideration all of the stuff that comes with that. Have we talked about it yet when we want to? Are we trying and we're just not telling you and we're having trouble? Have we miscarried and we're not going to tell you? There are all of these things that are very real problems that people have every day that they're not obligated to share with you, that they might not want to talk about, and you just asking those kinds of questions isn't okay. And I'm talking about this very passionately because as I get older, as I watch and learn and talk to people, these are the things that I'm starting to realize are harder questions to answer than you would think. Because I've had a friend who's had multiple miscarriages, and that's rough because she wanted those babies, but it just didn't stick. And it's not something she should be ashamed of, but it is still something that we put a lot of shame on. So if you ask someone like that when they're having kids, that is painful. And you may or may not realize that might not be your intention, but we have to be more aware of this as a people, that you can't just ask those kinds of questions. When are you getting a house? I don't know. Maybe when we can afford a house. Maybe we're struggling for payments. Maybe we're trying to figure that out as we speak. Maybe we're having trouble with it. That's really personal. Nobody wants to admit that they're having trouble trying to accomplish their dreams, or they're struggling, because then it's like, oh, well, have you tried this and have you tried this? And people butting in and putting in their 2 cents about things that they don't have the whole story on. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe they have a house, or maybe they don't want a house. But now you're putting all of this pressure on them, and it's uncomfortable, and we have to struggle to find an answer. If somebody is willing to talk to you about it, then great. But another side of that is that means it's also not your information to share with other people. So if I tell you something, that means I have confidence in you. But that doesn't give you the right to tell other people who you ask. I get really frustrated with these things because of how much I've seen it hurt people. Because of how difficult it is to even talk about this stuff sometimes. We are getting better as a culture on talking about the hard stuff. And I'm going to focus on pregnancy because it's one that people keep asking me and it's a little frustrating. But we don't talk about how often people miscarry. We don't talk about how often people have trouble getting pregnant. Because what we keep trying to tell people is, don't have sex because you're going to get pregnant right away. And we continue this narrative throughout their entire lives until they're at the point where they want to get pregnant. And then they realize it's really not that easy. Or it's really more to it than that. That there's all of these things that you have to take into consideration. Yet all these other people who haven't learned that yet, or just don't think about that, are asking you, well, when are you gonna? And it's hard. And it's frustrating. And on top of all that, some people don't want kids. Some people don't want to have that in their lives because it is a lot of work. Or maybe they're just not at the point they want to, and they have to go through the, oh, well, we're not thinking about having kids. And then there's the whole, well, why not? And the kids are the blessing, and all of these things, the arguments for having kids. And it's like, yes, I get it. But maybe we do want kids, just not right now. And we still get that lecture. Or maybe we do want kids, but we can't afford to right now. Or maybe we do want kids and this. There's so much more to it than a simple yes or no or a date. Because if you had asked me about major life choices 5 years ago, this is not where I thought I'd be. Because 5 years ago, I was traveling in Ireland, I was doing a bunch of school stuff, I was getting ready for an internship in Disney, I was living a different kind of life. And when I graduated, I foresaw myself going into this career and staying there and working my way up some corporate ladder to be successful and self-sufficient. Meanwhile, I had trouble finding a job. when I did finally find some work, it was never work that I wanted. It was like a receptionist job that paid very little. And I still had this degree and these college loans. And every time I tried to find a job, it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. But on the other side of that, I met my husband. And we got married. And I have a house now that I don't have to worry about. I have a car that runs. I have a job that I can afford to have because we've discussed all of this background stuff. And I can do something that I love and possibly look forward to getting a full-time with him if that's something that I want. My life looks so different than I thought it was going to be 5 years ago. Because of all of these hardships that I didn't expect to encounter, because again, it's not something we talk about. It's not something that we always prepare for. And so asking questions like, well, what are you doing now? I was unemployed for a long time in various periods of my life, and it was really hard to tell people that I wasn't working. Whether or not they judged or cared, that was really difficult for me because I felt like I was failing on myself. I felt like I should have had a job. And even now, sometimes I get really stressed out, and I talk to my husband about, I think that I'm failing us in not having a full-time job. Not taking into consideration how much I love my job. Not taking into consideration the fact that we really don't need 2 full-time jobs right now. Not to take into consideration what other plans that we've had, that this makes sense. Because I have to answer, and people don't always understand why I've chosen this path. With kids, you don't know what's going on behind the curtains for people, whether they are or not trying, whether they want or don't want kids. There is so much more than easy answers when we talk about these really personal questions. And that's why the title of this is, you're not entitled to my personal business. Because you're not. Because there's so much more to it than you're thinking you're going to get. It's not as simple as, are you going to have kids? Yes or no. Because, I don't know, maybe we do. Or maybe you want some and then something happens and you can't. Or maybe you don't want them, but you end up having kids. Like, there are so many things to take into consideration of things that are going on. And I've heard, and comedians tackle it a lot, that it's like, oh, when are you having kids? And they're like, I don't know, we're not thinking about it right now. Just because they don't want to have that conversation of, I don't want kids. And then they go, well, why not? They're great. There's so much that goes into big life decisions like that. And we try to treat them like very easy yes or no answers, and they're not. We expect people to pour out everything that's going on in our lives in detail because that seems to be the culture we're growing up in. Everybody posts it on Facebook, everybody shares, but do we take into consideration what comes before that? People don't share right away if they're pregnant. A lot of times they wait until the second trimester. And the reason I'm learning for that is because there is a smaller chance of a miscarriage. How would you feel announcing it as soon as you knew, only to find out weeks later that you lost it? And have people be asking you about it? There is so much that goes into this that people don't need to share with you because you're curious. And if they do share it with you, be a trustful confidant. Don't just spread it around because maybe they told you because they trusted you, because they wanted you to know and they wanted to share this with you, but they didn't want everybody else to know. There is a lot that goes on in people's lives that they don't need to share with you, and they don't have to want to share with you either. So if you take anything away from this video, take away to be more understanding and to be less nosy about people's lives. Yes, it's natural to be curious. I'm always curious what's going on with my friends, and I want to know all the good things that are happening in their lives, but I also have to understand that they might be going through hard times they're not ready to talk about. That they're going through something that they just don't feel ready to talk about at all or share with me. Maybe they will some point, maybe they won't, but that is their decision, and it shouldn't be something that I force on them. So when you go today, just keep that in mind when you try to ask people how they're doing. You know? And if they share with you, keep that in confidence unless they say, yeah, you can tell whoever you want. Alright? Thanks for listening.